We're going to continue on now with the expansion specification part of the primer, and this is a rather lengthy section. And while they're all not this long, a couple are longer, I'm sure. This is an important part to discuss at length because I think a good takeaway tool that you could have carry through and with you through your career when you speak to people about locksmithing and how you're going to key their cylinders for them, how they want them keyed. This is the lightweight, most nimble tool that you can lay your hands on to immediately know if something can be done. And when you have an understanding of how to, in the short future here, divide the key, you'll be able to understand how the expansion specification works and comes together to your benefit, so that you can leverage that tool and know immediately whether you can do something or not. And the expansion specification allows you to tell your client you can do that or you can't do that. And it really is a shortcut way for you to understand the length of the key and do you have enough real estate on the key using conventional approaches to key work to give the client what they want. So it's a great tool to have in the back of your head. So I'm going to begin reading it and we'll segue as it becomes, necessary to segue, I suppose. The expansion specification is the first crucial element to establish when designing a key system. But first, what is it? According to the List Council, expansion specification, a requirement for biddings to be planned beyond the immediate needs of a keying system. So I think of the expansion specification as a tool to know, can you give the client what they want? But giving the client what they want needs to incorporate today's needs and tomorrow's needs. And the expansion specification goes into to encompass today and tomorrow, the present and the future, as best as possible. Stated plainly, the expansion specification asks, how big will the system ultimately be? This is very crucial to establish up front. And if you cannot establish this value absolutely, then at least to the best of your abilities, with the owner, determine a theoretical maximum size, meaning how many cylinders and how many times those cylinders will need to be rekeyed. So how many keyed product is going into the job today? Will more be added? Okay, now you've got an idea of all the keys that you want made for all those cylinders. How many times will you possibly need to rekey all of those? So figuring out the expansion specification incorporates today's needs and future needs. Now, no one has a crystal ball. No one's clairvoyant. But you do have to establish a point of, okay, here's what we're designing it for. We've got to have somewhere to start with. I think that's a good idea because should the backdrop of the project or the client change, you can say, well, this is what we made the system for. We didn't make it for doing this, this, or this. Customers will come to you later and say, hey, can you... I'm trying to think of a slang term that a customer would use. Can you sub-master key that cylinder and make all the apartment keys work it? And after the product has been on the job for 3 months. But it's important to understand the application because it's not only how much physical hardware, but how many times you'll need to rekey that material. So a school is an example of doors that will need to be rekeyed occasionally. Not super often, but it certainly is a concept. An apartment building, certainly a situation where keys are going to be locked, cylinders are going to be rekeyed often. Retail spaces, cylinders are going to be rekeyed often, so much so that there are products that are marketed insta-key that you can just insert a key, turn it, and you've got a new key that operates it, and now the old key is disabled, which is fundamental fundamentally the science of cylinders. It's a very easy concept on how that stuff works. It's construction. It's lost ball construction keying is really what it is. But it's neat. The InstaKey actually has pins, bottom pins with masters that are kind of glued to them. And if you insert the change key, the key that will change the code, and you turn it hard enough, you actually break that adhesive that's there forever, unless you disassemble the cylinder and put it back the way it was with some adhesive, presumably. It will never work that way again. And so the point is that certain applications require cylinders to be rekeyed all the time, and you have to take that into account because you might have 20 cylinders, but if you need to rekey 20 cylinders once a year for 10 years, okay, you now don't have 20 cylinders, you've got 200. 20, rekey them all once a year for 10 years, so you've got to think in terms of that. You could easily run out of biddings, meaning you won't have enough stuff, as the technical term has been, I've heard used. You won't have enough stuff to be able to deliver that to the client. So you have to be mindful of that. Finding my place and where we were in the chapter. So then at least to the best of your abilities with the owner. Let's start that over. This is very crucial to establish up front, and if you cannot establish this value absolutely, then at least to the best of your abilities with the owner, determine a theoretical maximum size, meaning how many cylinders and how many times will those cylinders need to be rekeyed. Mechanical key systems can be beguiling to work with once the initial installation has occurred. Painting yourself into a corner is a translation. Mechanical key systems can be easy to expand, difficult to expand. They can be easy to expand. You've got plenty of room. You've got many biddings available to you. They can be difficult to expand, meaning you need advanced locksmithing concepts, skills, or they can be physically impossible to expand. And that's the bottom line. Now, impossible to expand, difficult or easy could also be considered, where's the life of the system? Can you easily expand a master key system that's been functioning for 20 years? No, probably not, because you've used up so many of what you had. If that system is a month old, you got more options available to you, because it's the mathematics of how the biddings can be harvested from the keys that you're using, what room to grow you have inherent in the system at the point on the system's timeline that you're on. Mechanical key systems, again, easy, difficult or impossible to expand past the original outline, concept, or original expansion specification. The ability to expand the system becomes dependent on how the system was initially conceived, constructed, and deployed. Also, the keying platform you are using will dictate expansion possibilities. An example would be conventional core or interchangeable core and the like, and dependent on the manufacturer's product line that you're working with. An example of that would be you can do more with this manufacturer's system because it has more theoretical volume that it can fill versus another manufacturer's. When you get into interchangeable core, you're always compromising what's available to you. You pay a penalty for using interchangeable core. It takes out of your system certain resources that then shrink the total maximum potential size of the system, is what I'm driving at there. And then, of course, one manufacturer's system over another. If you're doing Quickset, Quickset is probably the most populous lock, the most common lock that exists in the world. So there's tons of the stuff, and it keys up just fine. It's a great landlord-tenant sort of lock. But you're dealing with a 5-pin cylinder. Well, if you're going to talk about Corbin System 70 or Yale, you can get into 7-pin really fast, immediately, without any hesitation. So having all those chambers is an exponential growth in theoretical capacity. So if you're dealing with interchangeable core, if you have a large system, you're going to want to think about, is it interchangeable core, is it conventional core, and how many pins you're going to want to start with. Those are certainly questions for the factory. Your role here is to try to pick out where the speed bumps are and kind of navigate that stuff from a, from having the binoculars up on your eyes kind of perspective. It would be a good assumption to make that you're going to be working with the factory on the locksmithing portion of the project, but it is your responsibility to work out the best way to lay out the system for them, meaning you're going to provide the factory, here's the operational description, to use an electrified hardware term. Here's what we need to get out of the system. Here's our expansion specification, and we're going to go into that in a moment. So that the factory can work out the details, the science of locksmithing, assuming that you're not going to pursue really becoming someone who would be possessing that knowledge. And in fact, as I will say later in this primer, your time is possibly better spent at other pursuits. Especially in DHI, maybe pursuing your AHC or your EHC, then learning, the nuances of how to expand an exhausted key system. Will you monetize that knowledge? Yeah, I do. But at the same time, is it worth your investment when you've got the factory that you're going to be calling on? So the factory will figure out the science of it, but they're going to be basing all their information on what you tell them. That's your role. I can tell you that there is wizardry possessed by exceptionally accomplished individuals in the locksmithing industry, but sometimes you need more expansion than what you can harvest from a used-up system. Before we move on, I would add Aloha offers their certification AMKS, Advanced Master Keying Specialist course, and to gain that certification you will enroll in a class totaling 16 hours, at least when I took it. And honestly, I say in the primer, triple that time investment will be spent completing homework outside of class time. I am sure that there were people who spent less time than I did, and I know that there are people that spent far more time than I did. But I invested a substantial amount of time every week to do the homework, and then in a few instances to do it over again. But it was extremely well spent in terms of that investment in time, and that was an exertion. To say that you had to pay attention in class would be an epic understatement. Luckily, all the classes were recorded, so I was able to go back and simply draw on the lecture again. And I've viewed every lecture not less than 3 times, and ultimately turned in all the homework 100% complete, 100% complete and 100% accurate, with the exception of one trick question that Ralph put in there that wasn't a trick question. I just was lazy. Okay, so getting into that advanced stuff, Aloha is going to be just the source for that material, and I can't encourage you more to consider membership in it just because of the exposure that you're going to get to classes and people and these experts, these wizards. The advanced topics in that class, most of it is not necessary to discuss here, and expanding an exhausted master key system is one of those advanced concepts. It's beyond this primer, but possibly not beyond your desire to learn about that advanced topic. Now let's get specific. And I think getting specific, we should turn the camera to the screen view so we can start to look at some stuff. And we'll go to the let's just start with that. Let's move to the screen view. Okay, so as I just said, now let's get specific. An expansion specification can look like this. 1340. It's literally an expansion specification, is literally something that looks like this. That happens to be a symmetric expansion specification. There can be asymmetric, and I'll touch on that later. But it's a simple set of numbers. 1340 tells us everything we need to know. I mean, it literally tells me everything that we need to know. And that's what makes it so brilliant. It's simple. Once you understand how you arrive at it, you can wield that power to your advantage. Here's what 1340 means. We know immediately this is a 3-level system. That's pretty obvious. In the sense of you don't require a giant leap of faith to say, 3 levels. Change keys, master keys, grandmaster key. Levels to be explained later. There is one TMK. In this system, we can call it A, or the grandmaster. We can call it B or C, but it's a single letter. We'll call it A. That's the 1 in the 1340. There are 3 master keys. We can call those AA, AB, AC. They're the AA, AB, AC masters under the A grandmaster. That's the 3 in the expansion specification. There are 40 change keys. That's the 40 in the expansion specification. But the fun part is it's actually read that there are 40 change keys under each of the 3 masters under the TMK. Said another way, and the easier way to grasp the concept initially is there's one TMK under that TMK there will be 3 master keys, and then under each of those 3 master keys there are 40 change keys. So you've got a grandmaster, then you've got 3 masters, and under each of those 3 masters you're going to need 40 change keys each. So that makes, to just kind of reinforce that point, it makes 124 biddings in the system, meaning you've got 40 times 3, that's 120, it usually is 120, plus 3 plus 1, so that's 124 biddings are in this system. The part that might bake your noodle is just understanding in an expansion specification, it's not 40 change keys, it's 40 change keys under each master, in this case 3. And there are 3 masters under each grandmaster, of which, of course, there's 1. And that's how an expansion specification is looked at. So as you think about the levels of the key system that the client is asking for, as you're thinking about master keys and how many change keys would need to be under each master, you can put together an expansion specification. So you could have a grandmaster, you could have a manufacturing plant. Let's just say it's 20,000 square feet, and using rough ideas, you're going to have a master for all, you're going to have a grandmaster, you're going to have a master for all of the office area, and then changes under that master. You'll have human resources and or payroll. You'll have a master for that, and that'll have changes underneath it. And then you might have another master and some changes, like maybe you might have exterior doors under a master, but they're keyed differently. And then you might have industrial process cylinders in the back. You might have locks on gates to machinery that's dangerous to be around, other things of that nature. You could have cylinders on access to high voltage rooms. But as you collect in your mind how many masters you're going to have, you'll then collect in your mind how many change keys under each master you'll have, and then you can start to put together an expansion specification that will look like this. So where might we use this expansion specification? Where would a 1340 actually exist? Sorry. 1340 could be used in a 3-story office building. There are 3 tenants, 1 tenant per floor. Each floor requires 40 change keys. Well, that's pretty easy. That's pretty easy. And there's 1 TMK that passes every cylinder. Simple? Yes, indeed. It's that simple. But let's slow down. The expansion specification also needs to take into account not only the current needs of the owner, but also the future additions to the system, but more practically, the upkeep of the system or the maintenance of the system. So if they've got 40 doors right now that need change keys, you're going to have to think about that. How many times are you going to rekey those? Because you have to plan that. And people don't really think about the future and just the today. That's where the trouble comes. What I mean by upkeep is the tenants on each floor will sooner or later require rekeying to be done, and this is where you need to also incorporate your client's future needs as a means of upkeep. Think of this as profit center. It is unlikely an existing 3-story office building would add additional cylinders, as in adding additional doors, if any at all. Once you've got a building built, how many more doors are you going to add? Probably none. Probably none. You might add a deadbolt somewhere, I suppose, or you might remove a passage set and put a keyed lock. You've got the storage room, and all of a sudden your post-it note stock inventory disappears, so you put a storeroom lock on that office supply closet. But you're not going to greatly change it, most likely. So it's unlikely you're going to add additional doors, if any at all, though very possible keyed drawer locks, cylinders for cabinets, padlocks, and the like could be added in the future. You do need to think about that. Human resources it could be very believable that human resources would say, I need a key on this drawer lock. And someone like Olympus is going to be able to provide you with a cam lock that will take a full-size Schlage or Sargent or Medico. It would be the Yale platform that Medico, I think it's their 31 cylinder by Medico. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure it is. So you might need more changes for a question like that when it comes to expansion. The question does remain, how many times a year or in totality will you expect to rekey cylinders? People lose keys, get fired, get hired. These types of events require rekeying services, perhaps a new source of revenue for your company, as I said earlier, and a further demand on the expansion specification you are creating today. 1340 might not cut it. You might need 1660. So 1 grandmaster, 6 masters, 60 changes under each master key, or 60 changes under each of the 6 masters under the grandmaster. So the 1660 expansion specification would allow you to completely rekey a floor with a new master. You've got 3 tenants. Let's say that you've got a retail, you've got a Starbucks and whatever else on the first floor, and then you might have just offices upstairs. There's 1 tenant. It could be a consulting service. You could have an architect. You could have lawyer, an attorney's office occupying a floor, whatever the use is. But a 1660 is going to allow you a new master for each of those 3 floors, and 60 will allow you a 50% growth in the changes. So 1660 might be a better expansion specification than 1340. You double your masters and you add by 50% your changes. So 1660 would allow each floor to be completely rekeyed to a new master, and 60 would allow a 50% expansion to each floor for new biddings to account for rekey work and the possible added new or added cylinders such as desk drawers or padlocks. By the way, allowing a 50% expansion in a system is a reasonable and industry-accepted percentage of growth to a new system. Now, what's not industry accepted is not allowing for an expansion specification. Literally, expansion specification takes today's and tomorrow's needs into account. And I'm going to mention it at some point, I'm sure, but Jerome Andrews' Fundamentals of Master Keying book is extremely poignant and elegant on this subject. So you're going to want, if you're going to study locksmithing, you're going to need that book, in my opinion. Contact Aloha for it. I'm sure they can get it for you if they don't have it in their storeroom. The expansion specification is about planning. In fact, it is planning and preparing. Planning and preparing for today and tomorrow as best as possible. The expansion specification is also a test to make sure the system you have specified, or the one by others, can be in the first place brought to fruition. The test is this: will the mechanical limits of the cylinder technology yield what the client needs for today and tomorrow? Simply stated, can you produce what the client wants with the required hardware? Answering this question requires knowledge of the KBA, key bitting array, which we will discuss shortly, and an understanding of the limits of the system you are working within. Okay. Okay, so therefore the question to ask is this: is an expansion specification of 1660 permissible? Meaning, can your hardware give you what you want? Is the bottom line. The answer, the way that you get to the answer, the way you answer this is by knowing the key systems you are working in, not stems. So we are going to edit. All right. Specifically, whose cylinder platform you are using? Who's, what are you working with? Every platform: Schlage, Corbin, System 70, Pre-System 70, Medico, Yale, and every other manufacturer has a short set of fundamentals that regulate how you pull, tweak, and mold their technology to suit your needs. The capabilities that exist in all manufacturers' cylinder platforms. That's what we're referring to. Every platform, Schlage and the others, has this short set of fundamentals that allow you to understand if you can pull together what you need. We are referring to the capabilities that exist in all manufacturers' platforms. Okay. We are referring to the variables that exist in all manufacturers' cylinder platforms, those variables, and to the limitations that exist in all the cylinder platforms. How you approach answering the question requires the same logic for all cylinder platforms. And what you need to know is this, and for this primer, this is what you need to know. What is the step in the system? Said another way, what is the interval between pins? There's a magic number. I talked about some magic numbers in the previous chapter. 23 was a magic number for small format A2. It's not the magic number. It's just it is definitely not to be called the magic number. I shouldn't have said that. There is a magic number in A2, but 23 is the stack of the pins, the total of all of the pin heights that you can stuff into a chamber. 23 means 0.023. So if your increment between a 2-cut and a 3-cut, let's say, is less than 0.023, then you have a single-step system. If your increment is greater, you have a two-step system. If your increment is greater, then you have a one-step system. Yeah, is what it is. So the way that locksmiths, when they're teaching it, will say there's no number one master pin in a Schlage kit. And that's because the increment between a 2 and a 3 is 0.015. 0.015 is smaller than 0.023. That makes it a two-step system, meaning you can't master a change in a master when you've got a 2 cut in the master key in one chamber, and that same chamber has a 3 cut, because there's no number one master. It can be a 1 or a 3 or a 2 or a 4, whatever it is. But the minimum master pin height is a number 2, which is 0.03 inch. So 0.023 is what the industry agrees to as the minimum value before you're going to have a master pin that is not operating in the cylinder predictably and reliably. It gets too thin when it's thinner than 0.023 to work reliably. So Yale, I think, is 0.028, and that's a single step. Forgive me, I'm thinking of Corbin System 70. How you approach answering these questions on can you do it is the same logic for all cylinder platforms, and step is one of the things that you have to know. What is the max in the system? That means the maximum adjacent cut specification. Said another way, what cuts are permissible next to each other and what cuts are not. So in Schlage, it's 7. So you can have a 2 cut next to a 9 cut, a 1 cut next to an 8 cut, a 0 cut next to a 7 cut. You can't go any greater between 2 successive cuts than 7. You can have 7, but you can't have 8 or 9. And what happens is the width of the cut for an 8 or a 9, an 8 or a 9 is so wide that if your adjacent cut is a 0 or a, depending on what it's next to, if it's greater than 7, 0 or 1, that deep cut obliterates so much of the shallow cut that there's not enough left there for the pin to rest on. You can experiment with that. If you can cut in your shop, if you've got a ProLock Blue Punch, cut a 0 and an 8 together and then try to pin that cylinder and see what happens in those 2 chambers. Then you have to know how many depths are in the system. Said another way, what is the shallowest cut and what's the deepest cut? In Schlage, it's 0 through 9. So we know that we've got 10 depths, 0 through 9. So now we know how many depths are vertically in chambers. We know what cuts can't be next to each other. And then we know the increment of how we have to plan which of those vertical possibilities can be used. So I said those in reverse order. I went from 3 to 2 to 1. I do not want to necessarily use Schlage as the example, as it seems every example is based on Schlage. But we're going to, and it's because, it's ubiquitous. All of us in the door hardware industry, if you're familiar with a Lockmate, you might be familiar with Sargent, but you're going to be familiar with Schlage. And if you are not familiar with Sargent, I'm not really. I didn't do a lot of Sargent in my early career. But I did a lot of Schlage in my early career and still do, of course. There is just more familiarity with Schlage. I would prefer to illustrate this topic in Corbin System 70, but I think less of us are less familiar with Corbin System 70. But using Schlage will be easier, assuming we are all more familiar with it than System 70. But the truth is this: if you understand the following concept with Schlage parameters, you will or can do so with System 70, or Yale, or Best, or Sargent, or anyone. Think of every manufacturer's platform as having their own tiny set of rules, but the construct into which you stick those rules is the same construct. This would be a time to mention we are only considering conventional core and not interchangeable or removable core. That stuff is the same concept, but there's more technicality to it. Having a small format, Best, and all the clones of the Best format Yes, you Falcon. Yes, you Arrow, and every other person who's copied Frank Best's idea, which is interesting because I'm convinced that Frank Best was inspired by the Corbin master ring cylinder. I believe I probably hold a minority opinion about that, but when I look at the patent for the master ring in 1889, I think, and Frank Best's patent for the what would become the small format removable core in 1921, there's some similarity there. But I was told by Lloyd from Aloha that Frank Best was a high school shop teacher. And Lloyd figures he must have been a pretty damn good one because he had all these keys in his pocket, and he's like, why do I have to have one? Why do I have to have all these keys? And the way that the story was relayed to me is he was trying to figure out how to key them all alike, but what he was wasting time on was physically disassembling the lock to get the cylinder out. And that's where the birth of the removable core came. So having a small format or a large format or full size as Schlage, that's how the Germans pronounce Schlag, calls it, removable core can and does change your approach and are not covered in this primer. Also Medico, as are all high security cylinder platforms, anyone, ASA, Multilock, Obloy, and so many others, they're far more involved. They are studies in and of themselves. If you're going to attempt to pass the Aloha proficiency exam, you're going to want to attend a class. I did, taught by William Link, Certified Master Locksmith, and the class was very enlightening. The textbook that I was able to bring home with me is what I leaned on to pass the test. I was only there for 8 hours, but that textbook I spent 80 hours studying. Medico, because of their left, right, and center cuts. Oblo has rotating discs. ASA has its sidebar. But the root concept remains the same, and if you are master keying ASA or Medico or Oblo yourself, you're not reading this primer. That's for sure, I would think. Look to Aloha for classes to help with these advanced topics. Now, back to the task at hand. We are speaking about Schlag, and here are Schlag's parameters. Schlag is a two-step with a max of 7, 10 depths. This is what you need to know to create a key bitting array. And the expansion specification dovetails into the KBA chapter as well as the dividing the key chapter. Creating a KBA is what we will do to illustrate our expansion specification. Therefore, let's start with a KBA. There is no difference between a 2, 3, or a 4-level KBA, though we will be working in a 3-level system in this text. A 2-level system is the same. All that means is that there will be a grandmaster, at least one master, and at least one change key. Now, CK is confusing. I am told it could mean construction key, control key. So be mindful when I use CK, I'm probably meaning change key under each master. So there's at least one change key under each master. I will pick a TMK for the KBA, and it will be our 470529. I'm going to continue to use this as the TMK just so that you become more familiar with it. Should you take this epic march through this primer, you will see this TMK again in this text as I will reuse it simply for convenience. And here is this TMK. So we now have to introduce TMK and what the heck it is. But now is the time to do it because Schlag is a two-step, max of 7, 10 depth system. The KBA allows us to reinforce what all of that means. So let's start to do that now. Okay, I want to back up an inch and just acknowledge the fact that we're skipping from expansion specification and diving into KBA or key bitting array. And there's a reason to do this, a reason to immediately hop onto another major topic, and it's because can't understand the expansion specification until you understand how biddings are, the quantity of biddings are created, which is done through the KBA. So a lot of this you should probably just, accept on faith, and maybe just, read or watch and read without needing to try to memorize stuff. Initially, it'll ruin the experience of trying to learn it, I think. So back to the task at hand, just to back up a moment. We are speaking about Schlage, and here are Schlage's parameters. Schlage is a two-step max of 7, 10-depth system. This is what you need to know to create a KBA. Creating a KBA is what we will do to illustrate our expansion specification question. Therefore, let's start with a KBA. There is no difference between a 2, a 3, or 4 level KBA, though we will be working in a 3-level system in this text. We're working in a level 3 system, which has change keys, master keys, and a grandmaster. It doesn't matter if we are. We could be working in a 2-level system, just a master key and a change key. It makes it no more or less complex. I mean, it only does in how you divide the key, which is another topic we'll get into. But there's not a lot to be concerned with over that for right now. Again, all 3 levels mean is that there will be a grandmaster key, a GM, at least one master, and at least one change key. CK, I spoke about that being confusing terminology. I'll pick a KBA, a TMK for our KBA. It'll be 470529, and I'm going to continue to reuse it. So the top line is our TMK. So all you've done is you've taken a piece of paper and you've written down the master key. Think of this as the GM. As it is exactly the GM. It is the Grandmaster. The fact that this is a 3-level system does not matter, so forget about that for now. The bottom line is our SOP, our sequence of progression. We're going to talk at length on what an SOP is. It's a very simple concept you'll grasp quickly if you don't already know it. The sequence of progression, abbreviated SOP. This SOP, FEDCBA, for me is not ideal, as I would prefer FEABCD. All that the SOP does is defines the sequence that columns get rotated in. All I'm saying is I would prefer to rotate the columns in a different order. So the A column rotates, then the B column rotates, then the C column rotates, and so on. If I put A over here or here, it would simply rotate first. Whatever the B column is, that would be the next column to rotate. There's a reason for me wanting to do the SOP this way, and it's just not important to discuss right now. I'm just saying when we talk about the sequence of progression later, be mindful that we'd already touched on it. Also think of these columns of the SOP as chambers in the cylinder. The F column is the first chamber, or chamber 1. The A column is the 6th chamber. So F in Schlage, the first cut is near the bow. In small format, it's opposite. We're doing Schlage, so this is the cut near the bow. The A column is the cut near the tip of the key. In Schlage, chamber 1 is nearest the bow, opposite SFIC. This SOP is identical to how an odometer works. We are going to talk about this later. An odometer in a car, this sequence of progression up here is exactly that. We're writing this in total position progression, known as TPP, though this is not and usually never the best way to write a KBA. We start with TPP, total position progression, as in my opinion, it's the easiest method of progression to grasp initially. We touch on Y later in this primer. Why TPP is possibly not the best method of progression to use, but for purposes of this explanation, it is ideal. For right now, all you need to know is that there's going to be a master pin in every chamber. That's the only thing that matters with total position progression. I'm going to pause this video and fire it up in a different screen so we can have our KBA up on the screen and continue on through this. So let's do that right now. Okay, so I've got a little bit more real estate on the screen being captured. So on the left side, I'm going to leave the TMK there, pardon me, the KBA there. And then on the right side is what we'll scroll through our article here. So please accept the following truths, if you would. The TMK is 470529. We can see that over here. The first master key is 692529. We're going to call it AA. The first change key is 692741. We'll call it AA1. The second change key is 692743. Call this AA2. The fourth change key is 692307. Nope, that's wrong. Six nine two seven four seven. So very much forgive me. I was giving you the 64th change key. So the first change key is 692741, 743, 747. Can you guess what the third change key would be? We skipped over it. It's 692745, 41, 43, 47. That'll be called AA3. So here's where we'll want to look at the KBA. Can you see where we used up the 1, 3, 5, 7 in the A column? Okay. Our change key, our first change key, is 692741. We're going to rotate the first chamber, which is chamber A. And we're not going to go to the second chamber until we've used up all of chamber A. So if 692741 is the first change key, what's the second change key? Well, we're going to rotate column A. So it'll be 692743, then 45, then 47. Those are your first four change keys. Can you take a leap in terms of what will the fifth change key bidding be? Well, we've already used up all of the progression possibilities in A. We've got to now rotate the B column. So it's going to be 69276 and then run all of these. Then you'll have changes 61, 63, 65, 67. Now you've got 8 changes. Okay. Now, what's the next logical step? Change the B column to 8. 81, 83, 85, 87. That's 12 changes. Then go to the final progression possibility in B, 01, 03, 05, 07. Now you've got 16 changes. Just to expand that a little bit further, we've used up all the B progression possibilities. Now we have to go to the next progression possibility in C. So everywhere I had a 7 on those first 16 changes, I'm going to just put a 9. So it'll be 941, 943, 945, 947, 961, 963, 965, 967, 981, 983, 985, 987, 901, 903, 905, 907. So at that point, I now have 32 changes. If I then go through all 16 of these with a 1, I'm going to be at 48 changes, because 16 plus 16 plus 16. And if I do the last progression possibility in C, I will now be at 64 changes. Here's why this matters. If you look at a KBA or a 6-pin key that's 2-step, you can say, well, I can get 4 changes out of here, out of just one chamber. But if I need more than 4, I got to use up the entire next chamber. So if you've got a job where you need 4 biddings, you can get all of that out of the first chamber. But if you've got that same job and it needs 5 biddings, you now have to use into the second chamber. And you're going to get 16 because you can't not use, you're going to have 16 keys where you only need 5 because you can't use any of those keys. They're allocated. You may never use them, but you can't treat them as free keys to use them somewhere else. But so we can get 4 here, and if you need more than 4, well, you're going to go up to 16 by using this chamber. If you needed 25 keys, can you get it out of one chamber alone? Nope. If you need 25 keys, can you get it out of 2 chambers alone? Nope, because that'll only be 16. So you've got to go to the third column, in which you'll get 64. Factors of 4. 4, 16, 64. With that same logic, if I used up this column or dipped into this column, how many change keys will I have? Well, what's 64 times 4? That's the answer. It's 256. Okay. Then, if I did it one more time, 256 times 4 is 1024. And then 4096 if I rotated all of these. So, in your expansion specification, if you know that you need 40 change keys, how many columns do you have to dedicate to change keys? 3. Because to get to 40, you can't use 4 or 16. You got to take all 64. We changed our expansion specification to 60. It went from 1340 to 1660. So we know that all of these chambers here are going to be just for change keys. So we've used up 3 chambers. We have 3 left. Our expansion specification is 1660. We know, or we will know, your TMK doesn't count. It doesn't suck anything out of the KBA. You don't lose any ability to expand. We've got 3 chambers used for change keys. We've got 3 chambers left over. We know that we have to get 6 master keys. Same logic. I need 6 master keys. Can I get them out of one chamber? Nope, because I can only give 4. So I've got to dip into the second chamber. So if I said I need an expansion specification of 1660, can you give that to me out of a 6-pin key? You now know the answer is yes. What if I said 1665? Okay, I can only get 64 keys out of 3 chambers. That means I've got to take a whole nother chamber for the change keys. But I'm 1665. Can you give it to me? Yep, because I can use these 2 chambers. I'll have 16, and I only need 6. So what if my expansion specification was 1765? Well, to get to 65, I need 4 chambers. To get to 17, 4, then 16 is 6. 4 times 4 is 16. Out of 2 chambers, I can only get 16 change keys. So the answer is no, I can't. So while we've gone through that very quickly, you can see how valuable it is to be able to determine, can I give the client what he wants? Meaning, is there enough real estate on the key itself to do that? Okay. In a 2-step system, you're going to be able to produce 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. You can divide these chambers up into however you like. You can use this chamber for master keys. You can, you don't have to use the first 3 chambers for master keys. You can use this chamber for master key. I'm sorry, saying master keys, I mean change keys. But it's the same meaning. You can use any chambers that you want for change keys and master keys. What you can't do is use any bitting from the TMK down here. If you do that, you're going to have keys that operate cylinders that shouldn't, that cannot, in fact. So understanding what the KBA will yield you is the quick way to know will the expansion specification that the client is asking for be accommodated? Will the system give me what I need? Now, in the 11765 expansion specification, can you do it on a 6-pin blank? Nope. Can you do it on a 7-pin blank? Sure. You'd have enough chambers, because you'd have 3 chambers for masters and you'd have 4 chambers for change keys. So that's a situation where, well, we can't do it in Schlage. Well, you can. You can do it in Schlage when we get into the other methods of progression. But the straightforward approach we're taking of analyzing this step by step, the answer is no, you can't. You need a longer key is what you need. Or what you need is let's see. Yeah, what you need is a single step key. You could do it in System 70 Corbin or something that's single step, because that goes by factors of 5. So 5 times 5 is 25, 125. So you get a lot more keys. You could have done that in a 6-pin system in Corbin System 70, because you'll get 5 progression possibilities, where our fake expansion specification was 11765. You can get those 17 masters out of just 2 chambers. Anyway, we've gone way off the tracks here on that. So we've taken a deep dive, determined how many keys you can yield when you're employing these chambers in the KBA. So to back up, can you see we used up the 1, 3, 5, 7 in the A column? This is called progression. We progressed that column to obtain we've progressed that column to obtain 4 change keys. What would happen if in the change keys we changed the value in the 5th chamber from a 4 to a 6? Okay. So we're talking about our first 4 changes: 692741, 692743, 692747. Well, 745, 747. What if we changed the 4 to a 6? We'll get another 4 unique change keys through which we're going to fully progress the A column. We're going to run a 6 with all of these. That makes 8 changes, and so on. I've given away the answer, but any guess how many changes we will get if we fully progress the C, B, and A columns, also known as chambers, chambers, 4, 5, and 6. 64 is the answer. How do we get that? It's simple. 4 times 4 times 4, 64. A bonus question would be, can you guess the bitting of AA64? Well, they're all 692, but it'll be the last down here where you fully progressed each of those 3 chambers down to their bottom position. The first change key is going to be 741. The last one will be 307. And you're going to run through those progression possibilities methodically until you get to 692307. How did we get 64? We rotate each A column value with each B column value with each C column value. So you're basically taking that and you're making every one of these possible combinations fit together. And when you think of an odometer, you'll be able to methodically progress them so that you've not made a mistake. Literally in about 1991 or 92, I imagined an odometer and I thought, well, you do not have the same mileage on a car twice. You can't have 62,455 miles on a car more than once. It only happens once. Well, you want that absolute nature when it comes to your bidding. So to me, I thought I had discovered fire. I thought I had discovered, the atom. I was so proud of myself for thinking of that construct of the odometer to apply it. Turns out the odometer method is a very typically taught method. So I learned later in life I was less brilliant than I thought I was. Okay. We rotate each of those columns, and we do so in a methodical fashion. We're going to look at it graphically, but first a few rules. Never use a cut in the TMK and the change key in a TPP system. There will never be a 470529 down here in their respective columns ever in total position progression. Right now we are only studying columns C, B, and A at this time. We're just talking about these. Here is the relationship that creates our first group of 4 change keys. 41, 45, 41, 43, 45, 47. 41, 43, 45, 47. Now, I've come up with, I'm sure at some point in the future I'll realize I didn't invent this, but at this moment I feel like I did. A graphical way to show it. And I'm going to show that to you now. There it is. That is graphically showing you those changes and what I've used. 6927, 4, share the 4 with all 4 progression possibilities. I'm going to zoom a little bit here to maybe fit more on the page. Okay. Here is the relationship that creates our second set of 4 change keys. We've already talked about it. If you note, we have 4s in the 5th column. We're going to switch that to 6 because that's what our KBA shows. And here it is, 61, 63, 65, 67. Graphically, that's what it looks like. That's what I'm thinking in my head when I'm progressing that. Our relationship for the third group of change keys, sure, it's going to be oh, sorry, bear with me one moment. Uh, 81, 83, 85, 87, because that's the next progression possibility shown graphically here. Okay, we won't do the 4th set because it's obvious what it's going to be, 0, 1, 3, 5, and 7. So there's all 64 change keys. Doesn't really matter, but you could look at them if you needed to say or to reinforce how that's built, and then graphically shown here. Here's all of them. There are 64 changes here. So I've gone, what have I done? Horizontal rows. We're going to have 16 keys on each horizontal row. You can see that I'm working the B column up here. Then in the C column, I'm going to work the C column. I'll have 9 here. That'll get me another 16. I'm going to rotate the C column again for another 16, then another 16. That makes 64. Taking note of patterns is helpful when learning locksmithing, and most especially when studying the standard progression format that we will introduce later. Standard progression format, yeah. Patterns allow us to recognize and predict outcomes. Locksmithing is absolutely full of patterns. You know what, before I continue to read this, I do want to say that there's going to be an upcoming chapter where I dive deeply into the KBA and how to build it. So I've really just bum rushed you, so to speak, into Introduction to KBA, but it was necessary to understand how that can be built, or where it's coming from, where on the key you're pulling that out of, and it's just out of what chambers you need to use, and what system that you're working in. It's absolutely dependent on the system that you're working in, what you can do, how many progression possibilities are there in each chamber. So let's go back to where we were. Taking note of patterns is helpful with learning locksmithing, and most especially when studying the standard progression format that we will introduce later. Patterns allow us to recognize and predict outcomes. Locksmithing is absolutely full of patterns. Note the following patterns. The A column rotates every position, and you're just tying that to a different sequence of numbers in those other positions. So if you can get 4 changes out of rotating the A column one complete time, that means the B column has to rotate every 4 positions. There's a 4 underneath there. The C column rotates, therefore, every 16 positions. And when you rotate the entire C column completely, you get 16 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16. Multiples or powers of 4. Just like the odometer, because our SOP is FEDCBA, and all that means is A goes first, then B, then C, then D, then E, then F, and it's only written in this order to mimic an odometer. It can be any order you like. If the mental odometer is something that you're comfortable with, then that's how you rotate keys. That's okay. I can mix the sequence of progression up any way we like and accept on faith that any sequence of progression, or every possible sequence of progression that you can yield with these 6 letters, you will always, forever get the same keys. You will just get them in a different order. So in this sequence of progression, 692741 is the very first key. Well, if I swapped the, 692741 is the first change key. The second change key is 692743. If I swapped the A and the F columns, and I was going to rotate this over here, my first change key would be 692741, then 892741, then 092. But in the ultimate harvesting or yielding of changes from this exact sequence of progression, I'm going to have 892741 and 09. I'll have them just much, much later in the system. If I wrote all of the keys down, like I did here, to all the way to 4096, the columns that I rotate last, or later than last, they're going to come at the very end of the massive list that would be created. But if I swap the A and E columns and I wrote all 4096 keys, each one of those systems are going to have the identical biddings. They'll just be in a different produced order. Doesn't really matter. How does this all help explain the expansion specification? Maybe it doesn't. I hope it does. The above example shows us to understand that when we progress 3 positions, I'm just trying to get that editing blurb off my screen. The above example allows us to understand that when we progress 3 positions, as we are only progressing 3 positions in this example, 3 chambers of the cylinder, chambers 4, 5, and 6, which is 4, 5, and 6, and progression positions A, B, and C, we get 64 changes. So how does it help explain the expansion specification? You now understand that if you need up to 4 change keys, you can get them out of one chamber. But if you need 5 to 16 change keys, you need to use 2 chambers. And if you need up to 64 change keys, you need to use 3 chambers. Whether it be a change key or a master key, it doesn't matter. If you needed 2057 changes, you've got to use 5 chambers. Because you'll get 256 out of rotating these columns. Again, just multiples of 4. Here's some more patterns. Progressing 1 chamber will get you 4 changes. 4 times 1 or 4 to the first. 2 chambers will get you 16. 4 times 4 or 4 to the second. 3 chambers will get you 64 as expressed here. 4 chambers will get you 256 as expressed here. 1028. I said 1024 before. That's because it's not 1028. I'm going to screw it up again here. 1024. There we go. And then for rotating 6 columns, 6 chambers, will get you all 4096 as expressed here. Now it's helpful to understand this the way that I've written it out, or this, and it's because you want to be able, first of all, you can, I wouldn't say memorize these numbers, but you should probably memorize those numbers, because in a 6-pin 2-step system, those numbers are going to happen all the time. But when you look at a KBA, you want to be able to know how to arrive at the total number of biddings that can be created. You could go 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. That works. Or you can just go, well, I know I've got 4 progression possibilities per chamber, and there are 6 chambers, so it's 4 to the 6th. If you memorize that line right there, you'll never get 6 to the 4th power, which it's not. What we just outlined above is the first step at understanding how the expansion specification is accommodated. Here is what I mean. If one chamber gives you 4 possible changes, 2 chambers gives you 16 possible chambers, 3 gives you 64 possible changes, how many chambers do I need to accommodate the change key portion of my expansion specification? Of 1, 3, 40. I need 40 change keys. We cannot get 40 by progressing one chamber. That will only give me 4 changes. We cannot get 40 by progressing 2 chambers. That will only get me 16. We can see that we need 3 chambers, as 3 chambers will provide us 64 changes. It is important to note the tiers of available changes. Progressing 1 versus 2 versus 3 chambers and so on comes only in those multiples of 4 because we're doing a 2-step system. Doesn't have to be Schlegg, but a 2-step system. You must go to 3 chambers to get more than 16 and up to 64. If you need 65 changes, you progress the 4th chamber, and while you need only 65, meaning just 1 more key, you are going to get all the changes that 4 chambers can provide, and that is 256, or 4 to the 4th power. 4 chambers, 4 progression possibilities to the 4th power, because there are 4 chambers. Now, looking at the master key portion of the expansion specification, the 3 in the 1340, you see we need just 1 chamber now, as 1 chamber gives us 4 changes, and we need only 3 changes for the masters. Therefore, we have used up 4 chambers of our 6-chamber cylinder. So we've used 3 chambers for this, 1 chamber for this. 3 plus 1 is 4. We only need 4 chambers in this KBA to make this all work. Using 4 chambers in this way would give us a maximum expansion specification of 1464. It does. So we've committed a chamber for masters. That'll give us 4. We've committed 3 chambers for changes. That'll give us 64. But we're dealing with 1340 or 1660, whatever we want to do. So here's the test. Will a 6-chamber lock accommodate an expansion specification of 1565? So how many chambers do you need for the 65? You need 4. How many chambers do you need for the master keys? 5. You need 2. So you're okay. It will, as we need 4 chambers for our changes and 2 chambers for our masters. That is exactly 6 chambers, so therefore we can accommodate the system. Do you notice that power of 4 happening? Do you notice the power of 4 happening? But if we try to accommodate 1965, we're going to have trouble, because we're going to need 4 chambers for the change keys, and then 3 chambers. We're going to need... No. This is not right. 9, 4. Yeah, no, you could make that happen. This number here needs to become 17. 11765. You would need 3 chambers to get to 17, 4 chambers to get to 65, so therefore 3 plus 4 is 7. If it was I don't even remember what I had there. If it was 1965, yeah, you could do it, because that'll only use 2 chambers. You'd need a 7-pin system, available by many but not by Schlage. More exotic solutions such as multiplexing or rotating constants, which is an alternative method of progression to TPP. And the latter will be introduced, but only briefly in this primer. We're going to talk about multiplexing and other methods of progression. With this new knowledge, let's broaden our horizons. How many changes will you get with a 7-pin cylinder? So, extending what we talked about up here, just extend that out. You've got a pre-system 70 Corbin. It's a 2-step system, 7 chambers. 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4, or 4 to the 7th power. If you did that, you're going to get 16,384. I hope. You can now quickly look at any KBA, take note of the progression possibilities, what's down here in the progression area, and raise that number to the quantity of chambers using the quantity of chambers as the exponent. So how many progression possibilities? I've got 4. How many chambers? That's the exponent. That's 6. So now you know how many keys you can get. But knowing how to break up the chambers according to the expansion specification that you need to come to is a very great skill, which is actually called dividing the key. We're going to talk about that because I find it to be very useful. You can now look at any KBA, take note of the progression possibilities, and raise that number to the quantity of chambers as the exponent. This is what I mean. In the boxed area below, let me get down to the boxed area below on my other screen. In the boxed area below, we have 4 rows of progression possibilities and 6 chambers. Therefore, we have 4 to the 6th. So I've taken our KBA and I've made it more clear what are the progression possibilities. What would we have in a 5-pin cylinder? Well, we'd have the same thing. We would just have one less chamber. So therefore, it's going to be 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. So we're going to be stuck at a 1024 size system. What would we have if we had a Corbin System 70, which has 5 progression possibilities? Well, there's 5 progression possibilities. So now there are 5 rows here, not only 4. So now it's going to be 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, or 5 to the 6th power. A lot more keys than 4096. System 70 is single step. And by the way, let me show you something really important. I've been talking about System 70. So if you search Corbin in my site, pull up any item, click on More from Corbin. It'll pull up the manufacturer's page. Alternatively, and by the time you're seeing this video, the site design will likely have changed, but look for the word manufacturers. That's going to take you to this. Control F on your keyboard for Corbin, not Crobin. Corbin. I'm just waiting for that page to load. It's unusual. It's taking quite this long. And on this Corbin Russwin page, you're going to look for something called Cylinder Manual. If you work with Corbin Russwin at all, if you're not familiar with this manual, you have just found the greatest gift in the world of Corbin Russwin. This is the history of all things P.F. Corbin, Russell, and Irwin, all the keyways that have evolved since the late 19th century. This document goes into exceptional detail about the entire environment of Corbin Russwin. In the beginning, it's a history where the different classes of keys came from, how they're connected to each other. I've read this document cover to cover probably twice, and I've referred to it countless times. Now, what we're really looking for is a depth and spacing chart, and this would be, I want to pull up one that you'll have a chance of bumping into pretty often. DH class is fine. All right, here, pretty common. You know, an L4 keyway from Corbin's going to be pretty typical, Corbin Russwin. So this is a single step system. So there are 6 progression possibilities. Pardon me, there's 5, because one of these will be the TMK. So there's 5 progression. There are 6 depths listed here. One will be for the TMK, so you're left with 5. The max happens to be 4. And if you remember, we were talking about 0.028. That's the increment. So if you took 0.339 minus 0.311, it's 0.028. If you took 0.311 minus 0.283, it's 0.028, and on and on and on and on. So in Corbin System 70, they went to single step in 1970 is when they did that. But there's also a pre-system, well, maybe not for the Z and DH class. Let's take a look. Let's look at Z class. Okay, so Corbin, Russwin, Z and DH class System 70. 0.028 is the increment. We're going to increment 6 depths. We're going to go down to the Z class pre-System 70. 0.014, and now you've got 10 depths. This is a 2-step system. This is just like Schlage. So you'll have 4 progression possibilities out of this and 5 out of the other, because one of these you'll lose for the TMK, plus you have to be at least 2 cuts away from each other, because that increment, the 0.014, is smaller than 0.023, if you recall us talking about that earlier. So very interesting to see that. So here's an example of a KBA for a System 70 Corbin. There are 5 progression possibilities. That's the only difference. And you can refer back to that manual should you need to. So wrapping up the expansion specification, we've made a mess of it, but going through it 2 more times will make it less messy. The above discussion on expansion specification, and we're wrapping up this chapter right now, is premised on symmetrical expansion specifications. Expansion specifications can be asymmetrical. So rather than 1,340, you could have 1,220, 1,40. So it would look something more like I think it's going to look more like that. And what that means is I need 40 changes under one master, 20 changes under 2 masters each. 20 changes under each of the 2 masters. That's asymmetrical. Where you have a TMK, 3 masters under the TMK, where there are 2 masters that require 12. Let me just change this. I didn't read the next line. 12. And the 3rd master requires 24. For further reading on this topic, look to Jerome Andrews, CML, and his book Fundamentals of Master Keying, page 21. I think his book was written in 1990, maybe? Yes, 1990 is the copyright date. And 30 years later, it's the standard. And as I've said before, a lot of great locksmithing books, but for my money, none quite as elegant. Let's move on to dividing the key. It's directly related to what we're doing, so let's do that now.